Coming up, a Sad Styles production.
Hello and welcome. My name is Mike Aaronworth, signing on to the sign-off, a Frameworth podcast for yet another week. And I wanted to start off by saying I hope that everyone's been enjoying these sort of off-week podcasts as we've been having, kind of in between some of the interviews where it's just my dad and myself, and we get to sit down and talk about the way that the industry came to be, some of the inside stories, as well as some of the more unique interactions that have come as a result of, for the most part, my dad's 35, 40, 50 years of experience in the industry that he's had. However, in between those conversations, we do get to have the star-studded conversation like the one we have planned this week with another Toronto Maple Leafs legend. So far, we've had Daryl Sittler, we've had Doug Gilmour, and this week we're going to have another premier character in the world of Toronto sports, namely the Toronto Maple Leafs, in Wendel Clark. We're extremely excited to be able to sit down and talk with him, primarily with regards to the concept of fighting and toughness in sports. We're right in the middle of the NHL playoffs, and there's a ton going on right now, as there is every year, with interactions between players, incidents that happen on the ice, and I'd love to get the perspective of someone who's lived through it all. In an era where all of this stuff was much more common and much more acceptable, he's able to bring into our perspective a sense of comparison between what is different and what is relatively unchanged about the state of hockey as it currently stands. He is not the kind of guy that says players were tougher back in the day. He is very adamant that the current NHLer is as tough as nails, and he says so in this interview, but he does love to stress the fact that we can only play the game according to the rules that are put in front of us. So I don't want to put too many words in his mouth. I really found this interview insightful. It's less to do with the world of memorabilia, although we do talk about the NHL's use and perception of fighting when it comes to selling images and products, and he speaks a little bit about that, but it's more so about just the idea of toughness in hockey. We all know hockey to be a tough sport, and I really love his perspective on it, and I think you will too. So come with us. We'll see you guys on the other side for yet another great interview. It's me, my dad, Brian Aaronworth, the president of Frameworth, and Wendel Clark. We will see you guys after the break. Okay, and welcome back. We're here once again with a special guest. Obviously, I'm joined as always by Brian Aaronworth, the president of Frameworth, and my dad, as well as a very special guest. He was born in Kelvington, Saskatchewan, played hockey with the Toronto Maple Leafs, Quebec Nordiques, New York Islanders, Tampa Bay, Detroit, Chicago, drafted first overall in 1985, and captained the Leafs between 1991 and 1994. We're joined by the famous Wendel Clark. Wendel, thank you so much for joining us here. How are you doing?
I'm good. I sound like middle name should have been Samsonite when you rattled off all the teams there.
I didn't actually realize you played for that many teams.
6, I think, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I like that you have to ask. When you have to ask, you know, that's a pretty good sign. Well, as I mentioned kind of before we did this, and if you're a listener to this podcast, you know, one thing that we love to focus on this podcast is kind of the business end of sports, the marketing side and that sort of thing. So I will get into some of the questions about your playing career and maybe some of those interesting stories from the locker room. But before then, I just kind of want to get a sense of your general relationship to memorabilia. You know, when you're growing up as a kid, obviously everyone has this affinity towards things like the trading cards, the playing cards, meeting the athletes. What was your history with that before you ever made the NHL?
I really had no history. I wasn't a collector. My younger brother was. He sent mail in, got autographs back from Daryl Sittler and Ken Dryden. And that whole, my younger brother did all that. Sent it from Kelvington, Saskatchewan, then got the mail back, signed postcard, the old little 5x7s. I was never into that. The only thing I remember is getting the first hockey card was working with the Saskatoon Blades. They did the little mini hockey cards with the police, and it was the Saskatoon Blades. Right. The cards you see passed around now is a remake of those original cards that were started out with the police being connected to the Blades.
Now, it's interesting because so many people that we talk to on this podcast have that experience of, you know, loving a certain player or a certain team or something like that. So when was it then that hockey kind of became your thing? Was it always that and you just didn't really care quite as much about?
I never collected anything ever. To this day, I still don't.
Yeah.
I don't get attached. And in playing, growing up, I played. I didn't.
You let your playing do the talking. You didn't need to show someone a card representing it.
I didn't have that. I didn't collect that. I didn't. And then growing up where I grew up, and other than the people that made it ahead of me by maybe 8-10 years, the Bernie Federicos, the Barry Melroses, who was from home, and the people from the area. NHL seemed way too hard, way too far away. Those guys were too good. You watched them on TV.
Right. They were a separate.
I looked up to that I might be able to play on someday was the senior hockey team in Kelvington.
Yeah.
That is like even junior hockey. We don't see it out in Ontario as much right now, but all the Tier 2 teams have their own radio station. Tier 1 teams are covered on radio. So you sat and listened to Tier 2 games and Tier 1 games and got to know players' names because you thought those were the greatest players.
Do you still do any of that? Do you still watch some of the Tier 2 hockey? You still paying attention?
I don't. Not since my son stopped, got through minor hockey, and I used to catch it at Westwood or one of the arenas downtown. I'd catch some of the Tier 2 games, but not as much anymore.
How's he doing? He's in Hershey, right?
My son's in Hershey, yeah. Second year.
And drafted by the Washington Capitals. Yeah, Cody,
yeah. So he was a second-round pick two, or I guess it's 3 years ago now.
Awesome. Good stuff. Now, I do have one quick question. Were you aware before you were involved in the league itself, how much business went on behind the scenes there? Like in terms of these things like sports marketing, sports memorabilia, like you said, you just played when you were a kid.
When I started, I don't think it had even started yet.
Right. And
at the NHL level, it was just there. The hockey card, I think, was there two kinds, the O-Pee-Chee and one
Tops? There would have been,
yeah. Tops came in my second year, I think, but my first year, I think it was just O-Pee-Chee.
What was that? What year was that?
85, 86.
85, 86.
Right.
So we started in 92, and we were at the forefront of it. But I was never a card collector either.
Right.
We got the tall boy cards, that set that Dr. Price reproduced or something. And we used those around memorabilia, but that was in 92, and that was a big thing.
Sure.
Yeah, it was more late 80s, early 90s is when this, from what, like you think of the old Doug Laurie Sports at Maple Leaf Gardens out front.
Right.
When you think of it, there was no advertising on the boards, no advertising anywhere. You went into Doug Laurie Sports, and it was either a jersey, a mini stick,
or a hat,
and a hat, and a bad golf shirt. Remember the golf shirt, but you'd wear it, wash it once, you had to throw it out.
Yeah.
It was but that was really it for memorabilia in the arena.
So you were kind of on the forefront there, because we talk about like the especially the early 90s days in the Leafs, when it was, you and Gilmore playing kind of hand in hand at that point. It was unstoppable, the force that you guys had in Toronto, and that seems to be, like, especially with the start of Frameworth as well, kind of the onset of this new realm of marketing and memorabilia in sports. Now, did you recognize it starting, or did you kind of, someone would ask you for an autograph?
Well, the autographs has been forever.
Right.
You probably started signing autographs in midget.
Right.
Out west and big tournaments and stuff that we're on. But people, that's when it wasn't for money then. It was just the autograph.
Sure.
And that was kind of right up until mid-80s, in the mid-80s, early 80s, and late 80s. And then it would have been where we noticed it or paid attention to it the most was we were taking the two runs to the semifinals and the Jays were winning.
Right.
And then at Christmas in those years, I think the police came to us once. Somebody had counterfeited like 100 or 200,000 autographs between the three big Jays and the three big Leafs.
So you as well?
Yeah, like it was Dougie, myself, and I think Felix, and I want to say Alomar, Carter, Borders, or something like in that.
Wow.
And the police were, because none of us had signed any of this stuff.
Right.
Like these were big numbers,
I
and it could have even been 250 or higher.
Well, yeah, usually when
they were in a garage that they busted, and we're going, I would remember signing that many.
Right.
Oh, for sure.
And none of us, between all the players, we haven't signed.
Oh,
and that's when it started getting...
Well, there was big money in it because that was the hottest. I mean, again, fortuitous. We started in 92. The Jays were hot. The Leafs were on fire. Everybody was playing well. And I remember your jersey, Doug Gilmore's jersey, is stuff that people would not have... previously, you'd ask for an autograph. It was more of an excuse to walk up to the player and say hi, and then you'd ask for an autograph.
It was to commemorate a specific interaction.
Then all of a sudden it became, all these live auctions and silent auctions became part of the norm, and people would buy a Doug, and then you would get guys in an auction that would, it was a big dick contest. Who's going to pay the most for the thing? And So one guy would say, well, I'll pay $200 for that jersey. Another guy, well, I'll pay $300. And then it would get up to $1,000 for a Wendel Clark jersey. And it was just, and you know, it was a Wild West. Nobody really knew what those jerseys were going to end up being worth.
The value was whatever someone was willing to pay for it on that given day. Yeah. Right. And to be at the forefront of that must have been fantastic. Like you said, there was just such a groundswell of support for Toronto teams at that point in time. And you being at the forefront of that, like I mentioned with you and Dougie, you were clearly two of the crowd favorites at that point, kind of the saviors of the team. I'm sure you hear this all the time, but I've always wondered, you being in that situation, was there ever a bit of a rivalry internally between the two of you to see who would be the bigger favorite, or no?
Could care less.
Oh, really?
Well, the better the team does, the better the players do. Individually, you do better.
Sure.
An individual in this market proves it better than any other market. You can have great season and your team does nothing. Your marketability does not carry over time.
Yeah, absolutely.
But your team does well.
Right.
And you might only be average. Your marketability will carry a long time because the fans, here's where the fans, just like playoffs, it is the playoffs, fans get into hockey or anything at playoff time.
Yes.
So now they're right in with the player every day. And so that really makes the player more popular because that fan is really watching. He's really paying attention. He's reading all this stuff. Well, regular season is kind of regular season.
Yeah, yeah.
But playoffs really puts, and so if you have good playoff friends, and I just go back, like, Darryl didn't win a cup.
Right.
But look at between the Canada Cup and the two playoff runs, I think that he had the semifinals where there was Darryl and Lanny and Palmy.
The game-winning goal.
You just remember the team.
Right.
It's the team that does it, not that Darryl even got the game-winning goal.
Yeah.
You remember Darryl, but you remember the team first and then the individuals.
That's a great point.
And so that kind of goes why you want good playoffs, even not so much in the marketing end, but players that are come up this year as free agents. If they played on one of the two teams in the finals and they're a third, fourth liner, they're getting re-signed right away.
Right.
They have experience on a winning team.
Right. That goes a long way.
There might be a player that lost out, team didn't make the playoffs, and he's just as good as that player that made it to the finals.
How much of your experience in that 93 era kind of spoke to the rest of your career and your ability to perform in the playoffs and your standing among those teams? Because those years were kind of the most successful years Toronto has had in a very long time. Obviously, losing to LA was a big one. With, by the way, coach of LA at the time, Barry Melrose, was your cousin, is he not? And grew up as well, because you mentioned Barry Melrose earlier in the story. Yeah. Any animosity there or no?
There's no. I have not an animosity of any player ever.
Oh, really?
No, because it's a game.
That's
even the ones you're fighting.
Put it this way: if I'm building a hockey team and I have animosity on my team, I don't want them there.
That's fair.
Yeah,
I don't care how good the player is.
Yeah.
And this comes from a tough guy that had many fights, and yet what I find from knowing a lot of different players, especially Wendel was a great player and pretty tough out there too. A lot of guys were just fighters. Other guys
Captain Crunch, great nickname, by the way.
But at the end of the day, I find it amazing when I go to a celebrity golf tournament and all these guys that were just pounding on each other over the years.
Right.
How close they are, almost closer than the other guys. There's a mutual respect and all that stuff. So it's not like you hate the guy because he hit you once.
Right.
No, actually, the guys that battled the hardest on the ice are probably the closest off the ice because they had to play that same role on their team.
Right.
They understood what he was going through because we're going through the same thing on our team.
It's a job. It's a profession.
You're just out there and you don't carry it over. It's on the ice and I'm there to win.
Right.
Like you're not playing for, at the level right now the NHL is going on in the playoffs. They're not playing for participation badges and we had a nice game, but we lost.
Right.
You win or there's consequences. And that's pro sports.
It's funny. There's a story. We were talking earlier on a previous episode about Eddie Shack. He comes up. He used to come in here literally every day, and we can't say enough good things about him. And he tells a story that I found absolutely fascinating. I heard it when I was quite a bit younger, so I didn't understand that professional respect that you would have for another player just doing the same thing as you on another team. And he tells the story about being on vacation with Gordie Howe, and they would go at each other. And they're having a couple drinks together, and at one point, Gordie turns to Eddie, and he says, "Let's make a deal. You no longer hit me on the ice. I'll no longer hit you on the ice. And he says from that point in time, that pact, they actually didn't go after each other in that capacity on the ice, which I found fascinating.
Played the game like it should be played, but they weren't going after each other.
What Eddie says is there was a time he could have lined him up way more than he needed to, and he pulled back because of that agreement. So I always found that funny. Do you have any stories or interactions with Eddie Shack? What's your relation?
No. I met Eddie right from the mid '80s, like everybody else, when I got here, and they probably threw away the mold on Eddie when Eddie was made, and big, colorful character, and prime time example of a role player. Had he not played in Toronto on winning teams, and he played in another market,
right?
Eddie's not Eddie.
Right. That's true.
That
he went
goes
to
back
six other teams too. I think.
Yeah,
exactly.
Goes back to playing in marketing in the right spot, being a key role player in situations, and a character.
Yeah.
See, a lot of our characters changed now. It started changing. Well, changed in the late '80s, especially because that's when all the guys that have no helmets quit playing.
Right.
And then you get into 2000s, you have power skating. So everybody skates good now. There's no Brad Marsh comes out with no helmet on. He plays this way. Everybody had a personality.
Sure.
Just how they grew up playing the game. Where today you're all skill coach and you got the mask and visor. There's not as much personality for the people to get to know these players.
I love that.
You get an Eddie Shack or a Daryl Sittler started without the helmet. Like these guys, these fans knew those players because they seen them with no mask, no helmet.
Right.
So they knew that person.
Well, there was Guy Lafleur with the flowing hair. Duguay in New York.
Yep.
We're all like
those were imagine that personality without that stuff and marketing it today, where you could actually see the mannerisms of the face and with all the TV. Like back then, there was I think it topped out when I started 3 camera angles in the gardens.
Right.
Or picture what they have today under. Like you
They've
can't
got
get away
slow
with
motion shots
today.
of your face. Yeah, if you do anything behind
the play with one referee, there was more stuff going on back then than nothing got called.
Well, I mean, that's obviously, you almost can't get into a conversation with you and modern sports without talking about how much these things have changed, especially when it comes to the interactions on the ice. And we were talking earlier, my dad and myself, about the role of fighting and grit in hockey as it stands right now. I mean, you were known for giving it your all on the ice, as a lot of players in the modern day do as well. But there's always this weird, to get into the marketing side of it, there's always this weird interaction between the NHL, who wants to sell and market themselves as this big, tough sport, and limiting what you can do in terms of selling an image of a penalty or someone bleeding, or, do you have any thoughts on the way that the NHL deals with violence in their sport? I mean, not to put you in any hot water, but...
No, because I really don't know the ins and outs of what their exact rules are, but they're probably looking out for the bigger picture.
Right.
Yeah, right. But there's a conflict there, Wendell, because some of the best shots that I have, you got the shot of Dougie where he's got blood dripping from him.
Right.
He's we call that the warrior, and it's one of the best sellers. You hitting somebody real hard or a fight scene. The NHL will not let us license those photos.
Is that right? See, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's pretty
They
interesting.
don't want blood. They don't want us marketing it. And yet, on the other side of that, EA Sports, the video games, one of the whole parts of that, I don't play those games, but I understand there's a fighting mechanism in there.
Fighting mechanism, and every year they talk about the improvements to the realism in fighting.
We're not allowed to show it. We're not allowed to promote it, but they let EA Sports do it because it sells video games, and they're a much bigger picture than we are.
Right.
So people love that. One of the greatest shots of all time was Nolan Ryan when he got hit with the ball and he's pitching with the blood dripping down. And everybody loved that photo. It just shows the grit and the toughness of the sport, and yet the NHL doesn't want that. Do
you miss any of that? I mean, the kind of the focus on the grit in the NHL now, or does it not bother? It was an era that's now come and gone.
I take it for as it comes. Like it comes and then it's going to keep evolving.
Right.
If I say I like it the way it was, then you're the old guy that can't move on, and so it's. Because there's a lot of toughness in the players, but back in mid 90s, the rules started to change where the NHL dictated what rules were.
Right.
Fighters didn't dictate how the game was played and toughness. The rules are. And so that's kind of how it's dictated. And they don't want fighting to dictate it. Well, fighting changed in 2000.
Right.
because players were now starting to train to fight.
Right.
Not train to play hockey.
Right.
And the players started getting to be 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", 250, 260, 270, and training to fight, not play.
Right.
And so the NHL, I want to say, I have no proof, is now scared of something's going to happen here because these guys, and then they're texting back and forth in the dressing room, deciding when they're going to fight each other.
There's this. I didn't even realize
so
that.
You're going,
wow.
So the NHL, to their point, is going, this has nothing to do with the game.
Right. Right.
So I understand why you don't want that.
Yes.
I want the spontaneous, instant stuff like we just did with the Flino getting in the fight with Perry.
Right.
I said, I'm all for that. I just wish the building was full.
Right.
People think, well, it was an accident. What happened to John? And everybody, that a bad case.
Sure.
But Flino, being an ex-captain, says, I have to wake our team up again. We have to get back to playing hockey. We just took 40 minutes here. So we're fighting.
Yeah.
Not because of the fight, not because it was an accident, only to get my bench awake to say we have a hockey game.
And if it's a part of the game, then he's
reasonable.
Just
waking the bench up.
Yeah.
And even Sidney Crosby told me a story. And he's not a fighter.
Right.
But at one point,
I think it was Matt Niskanen.
I think it was Niskanen.
Yeah.
And he's lining up against him, and he says, we're going to go.
Right.
And me? What are you talking about? He says, we're going to go. And it was just to wake the team up.
Was it? And
he had a fight. And he doesn't fight very often.
No, we had teams like Dougie, probably the best player, I always say, between 92 to 94, those 2 year windows, that 2 year window. I don't know if there was a better player in the NHL for what he did for our team.
Sure.
I'm not saying Dougie's Wayne Gretzky over 50 years, but
sure.
for that 2 year window, I don't know if there was a better player in the NHL for what he did and what he did for our team. And he'd be looking at our team maybe being dead on going into the second period. And he's our team that, he's usually getting 2 points if we're winning. And so if he sees us dead, he knows the cavalry's coming if he starts something.
Yeah.
Like if somebody does something to Dougie, so he'll go automatically and start something.
In hopes that he gets attacked.
He knows the cavalry's coming because that's our best player. He's not.
Oh, wow.
And all of a sudden it changes the game because now
momentum.
You're doing that to our best player. So now the second line wakes up, third line wakes up. And he knows that.
Yeah.
Because he's looking around going, this is a pretty dead.
Our
building's dead. And like you said, Sydney would have done that. And our team's pretty dead today. If I do something that's not normal for me, our team's going to say, oh, look what he's like.
Right.
And that starts a team. And that's the personality of players that you can really make the game one way.
Sure.
But it's these personality things in different, not always fighting or not always, that really dictate your team and how they play.
I have just a quick question on something that I keep thinking about. So in his day, Scott Stevens was one of the biggest hitters in the game. Like he was
open
a
ice
devastating hitter. And some of them, he just knocked guys right out.
Right.
And I'm sure that under today's standards, some of those hits would be a 5-game suspension. Because I'm not sure they were all not headshots. He just went after them and hit them.
Sure. I think the definition of charging was a lot different.
Where would he be in today's game, a guy like Scott Stevens? Or do you feel that they were all...
He'd be a $10 million defenseman.
He still would be.
The biggest thing all teams want right now is the big fella in Washington.
Right. No, I was talking more like
but I'm just saying, but that type of style that no teams have and everybody wants.
Right.
Right.
Because it's not what you bring up. It's not what's talked about anymore. It's not how the game's played.
Right.
But after game 82 and game 1 starts again, we want north and south. You have to be able to score in around the crease. You have to make it hard on the other team to play games.
Right. Right.
And so the Scott Stevens way, because he could do it all, plus be mean.
Right.
So if you can play 30 minutes and you're mean, that's like 4 players.
That's
like you're playing 30 minutes, so that's like 2 guys.
Right.
And then you're the dimension of mean or finesse or last minute or first minute, that's invaluable.
There's no question what a great guy, great player he was.
What I love about this is, I think from an outsider's perspective, let's say someone who doesn't really watch hockey or just a casual viewer, they probably view the violence of it, or the fighting and the grit, as almost barbaric, without thought. That's the people who don't know what they're doing and they just go and clash heads. But from the perspective of someone who's been into it and who's also been a very talented and skilled player like yourself, to shed this light on what that means to a hockey team and how the sport progresses when that's an element of it, I think that's a great perspective to have.
And Toughness Today isn't maybe, and really there was no fighting really ever in playoffs,
right,
in history.
Right.
Maybe one, we had one in the LA series where I got in a fight, but that was it in the whole playoffs.
Yeah.
So in toughness doesn't mean always fighting, but you have to play in that area to score goals.
Right.
What did Montreal do? They're now going into the semifinals. What did they do at Christmas of this year? They started getting rid of all their small defensemen and got big defensemen.
Right.
Because they knew who's been in the playoffs more than the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah.
Come playoff time, the game's changed.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we have the best goalie. So if we make sure the front of our net is consistent and you don't do anything high risk.
And that's what they do. They just collapsing in and around price. Yeah.
From outside, or if you do score from inside, it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
That's never changed in hockey. Take an era, this era, my era, 70s era,
sure.
60s era. You talk to the guys that won. Come playoff time, inside that box in front of the net.
The size has changed, but guys like Tim Horton, Bobby Bond were so tough.
Yeah, like Bobby Bond was more not for regular season. It's all Bobby Bond's playoffs because it's his style of a play. Okay, now it matters how I'm playing.
Right.
Because now you're hard. You want guys that are hard to play against.
Well, with that, because I think you would very much see yourself as that way. I mean, the formula you're talking about is the way that you would have played the game. Be tough, make it hurt to play against you. Even if you get a goal, it's going to hurt, that sort of thing. And you started out as a defenseman. So it was, I think you were originally drafted as a defenseman. Is that correct?
Yes.
So first of all, quick question. Were you involved in the decision to shift you from defense to offense?
I showed up at training camp. I read my name on the door. Your dressing room in the Leaf room. You're playing left wing with Courtnall and Lehman.
Wow. And your reaction?
I guess I'm a forward.
Got to do what I got to do.
As long as I'm not going back to junior, I don't care where I play.
That's fair.
I played 3 games forward and 3 games defense in the World Junior.
Okay.
That's where I first played. I made the World Junior team as a forward.
85, and you won that?
84, yeah. We won in Finland, the gold medal, and Terry Simpson and Sherry Basson were taking a team to Finland, so they said, we want to take like 8 defensemen.
Right.
So in order for you to make the team, will you play forward if we want you to play forward? And they did that to myself. And John Miner, who played for Regina Pats, who had the same style as me, offensive, kind of physical. So we both made it as forward/D-men, but we were D-men in junior.
What did you enjoy playing more?
I always enjoyed playing defense as a kid. The kid, and I tried to get my son to play defense. He wouldn't.
Right.
It's not, center's like the fun thing.
That's
to play,
the sexy one to play now. Yeah.
I said, I try to talk him in because you grew up in a small town. If you play defense, there's only 3 defensemen on your whole team.
Right.
You out of a 60-minute game, you play 58 minutes.
Right. That's right. I mean,
and there was no, you stay back or you do this. You start with the puck. It's the old Bobby Orr.
Exactly.
He never left the ice growing up.
Yeah.
He never, right up through till junior.
He never left the ice in the NHL either. How many minutes?
Yeah.
And then you play in Boston Garden where you don't have to skate anywhere.
Right.
Remember how small it was?
Yeah.
He could play I remember watching Ray Bourque play all game in Boston. Ray Bourque could play 28 minutes on the road, 48 minutes at home.
Now, is that a conditioning thing, or is that a difference in the way that
because those guys just skated effortlessly.
Yeah.
But really good guy, like probably in my era, just after me, the guy that could conserve energy, didn't skate like those guys, was a guy like Pronger.
Right. Yeah.
So smart that everything was done. I don't know if there was a better guy than Lidstrom ever.
Right.
I
try to make that argument all the time.
Like is where to be at the right time and not ever look like you're working, but you take the puck off the guy.
Sure.
Like he's in my era, because I got to play with him just a bit in Detroit. And you don't realize until, every day in practice.
Yeah.
He come and just takes the puck away from you. Like he could play, I had to be physical because that's how I got to be a better player.
Right.
He could play the game so smart
that he didn't have to get very physical.
He didn't have to abuse his body to be that good.
Right.
Yeah.
And he
if
had a very
you can't
long
be
career.
that good, you have to do the other things to be good.
That story of my life.
But that's why, he could just be so good and not look like he's trying. He's so good at it.
And that's not to take anything away from the way that you were playing, but the question that I was going to get to earlier was, your style of play, the one that you're talking about, that specific kind of person that is hard to find in the NHL right now. who do you think right now mimics that the most? Because a lot of people on the Leafs have tried to come in and enact the Wendel Clark formula, even so much as like David Clarkson,
you can't with the style. It
Right.
all depends on the style your team plays. Our team doesn't play that style, so you can't play it game in, game out.
Right.
You can't play that way.
Do you think there's a player outside of the Leafs in the league that reminds you most of yourself?
Well, in a lot of ways, you take Wilson in Washington and
Right.
add 30 goals to his name.
There you go.
But true, like and I feel bad some ways. You're asking him to play on the line because that's when he's really effective. He's
Right.
went from fourth line tough guy to first, second line, but you got to play on the line.
Yeah.
That's when you're good. You're intimidating. Well, the odd time he's going to cross it.
Of course.
So you can't, and the team doesn't throw him under the bus. Say, okay, he's going to get suspended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I only had I maybe suspended one game ever, but those guys that play on the edge.
See, and those are the guys that you want to have on your, like, fans would love to see Marchand, Wilson.
Yeah.
You want them on your team.
Always.
But you hate them on the
Well,
other
because
team.
you're if you're going to score, like Pat Burns, his whole thing playing in the worst home building to be in is Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's 12 players from Ontario on every team.
Right.
So they're having another home game. Like in our era, Bellows comes in, he's getting 3 goals tonight, so we have to, as a team, score 4.
Wow.
Because Bellows is getting 3.
Right.
Howard Chuck's coming in, he's getting 4 or 5 points.
So you're saying when you say the hardest, because I'm thinking when you say the hardest place to play in, I'm thinking like, well, the fans are really tough, but you mean everyone's from home.
Because everybody's come. This is their home game.
Oh, I never
Like we go to
thought
play
about
in New
that.
Jersey, there's no home game for us in New Jersey. Nobody cares to be playing.
Right.
But you come in, all these and superstars, like from the Bellowses to the Gretzky come in. We better get 7 goals tonight because he's got 6 points.
Yeah.
Like
and
that's because
he's got half the fans in there rooting for him too, because he said, how many times do the opposing players that you know call you and say, hey, can you get me a couple more tickets? I got 40 fans coming in.
Yeah. So this building, and Pat Burnsy, and same with Brophy and Maloney, who were my early coaches. We had a couple playoff runs in the 80s there too. But like Burnsy said, I want them. We may lose at home, but they're going to limp out of here with their hands in the air.
There you go.
They're not going to walk out of here with a smile.
Right.
And that was how, Dougie, if I played with Dougie in the first line, which I really didn't play with Dougie until playoffs.
Yeah.
Because we created I'd play with Eastwood or John Cullen for the regular season and then move up and down. Dougie would play on 2 lines in playoffs.
Yeah.
Like Dougie would play first line, third line. But the first line, okay, you play with Dougie, you can play this way.
Sure.
The other 3 lines, you dump it in, finish your check, and the guy doesn't get up.
Yeah.
That was Pat Burns. That's wear them down by the end of the game or the end of the series.
They're going to regret winning if they win.
He was a really well-liked coach by the players, wasn't he, or no?
No, yes and no. At the time, you're respecting. The big thing is respect because you're winning.
Right.
He went as, all of a sudden he turned Cliff Fletcher and then brought all the guys in and Burnsy, and then we were winning. So that was what he brought in this. And Burnsy was one of those coaches that I call it the 110%. Sooner or later, there's a burnout factor. Because there's no such thing as 110%.
Right.
Sooner or later, you've burnt, and they know that. So he goes from Montreal to Toronto to Jersey to Boston he knows that shtick wears out every 3.5 years.
Similar to like Tortorella.
Same as Tort, same old Keenan. But they know that.
Yeah.
They know that it's going to, but that's how hard he pushed.
So he's a tough.
I go tough cop. And then, and the thing with players, we're 20 years old to 25. The coaches, and Burnsy was probably younger, late 30s, 40s. And I always explain to people, well, players want players coaches. I said, the players and coaches are never going to see eye to eye. I says, it's like kids.
Right.
Does my son at 20 see eye to eye with me at 50?
Right.
Not a chance.
Right.
And that's the same. You have a 50-year-old coach coaching 20-year-old hockey players. That hockey player may not understand the knowledge of what he knows.
Well, I mean, what good is a coach that just says, yep, good job. That's great. Awesome. It's just never going to work, right?
Name me all the teams that win where everybody likes the coach.
Fair. Yeah.
Best coach ever in hockey is who? Scotty Bowman.
Scotty Bowman, yeah.
With most wins.
Right.
Yeah. Talk to the Montreal Canadiens, the Detroit Red Wings, and see how high. But they respect the big thing, how he can pull it and you win. But did he do things that were always fun and nice? And it didn't matter who you were. You could have been Stevie Eisman or Larry Robinson.
Sure.
He didn't pull punches.
Sure.
And though you talk to those players and they know that. He didn't let them off the hook. Any player that comes in And hockey's probably one of the teams, because basketball, you see the best player run the team.
Right.
A player cannot run a team.
Impossible.
It will not, he has to be one of the soldiers, even if you are the superstar. And I think you're proving it with that Edmonton Oilers team that won under Sather. Those guys, it was still him.
Yeah.
That kept all of them. You had Wayne Gretzky, you had Messier, and
a lot of personality.
Think of it as a coach. You that has that many good players.
Sure.
You have to be able to say, and not have that player go backwards on you because he's got more power than you do.
Right.
And that happens from time
to time. It happens,
yeah.
And so a lot of respect, because that's a harder animal to handle sometimes, is the superstar.
For sure. Now, we've talked about kind of, some coaches that may get under the skin of the players and things like that. But I want to turn to the locker room a little bit. And I want to talk to you about some of the best memories that you have from maybe some specific players. Who is the one player that you knew every time you went into the locker room was going to be able to put a smile on your face? Someone, just a jokester, someone who you just really buddied up with.
Probably, guy we started and played the longest together was Todd Gill and I. Started in the 80s together, and then we're part of the 90s group.
Yep.
So we lived through the 80s and the 90s when it was really good. And there's a guy that he took a lot of heat all the time, being that 5th, 6th, 7th defenseman, then a 2-3 defenseman, a little guy, and played everything with his heart.
Yeah.
Like he'd be right in the face, and he's going to make mistakes, but he's not because of not trying or not caring. It's just, I messed up. I own up to it. Bang. Yeah, my fault. But just come to the rink every day wanting to play.
Were you as a rookie, you were playing with him?
Yes.
Yeah. And what was, now one thing that I always love to hear is you brought this up when you talked about coaches, how coaches, they just have a different level of experience and expectations. As a player, a new player in the league, you're also, I feel like, probably trying to cash in a little bit on being in the NHL and enjoying your life as an NHL star. Do you have any stories or memories from your first year in the league that, without going into the details, maybe you wouldn't have gotten away with in today's league? Maybe some stories of just going out with the team and showing up to practice a little late.
A lot of stories like that, but we're not allowed to talk about it. You guys can take it, but I can't talk about that.
That's fair, yeah.
But no, like I always say, even with our play, when I explain to people our Matthews, Marner, Nylander, when they come in here and people, the pressure of being a young guy playing in Toronto, they have zero pressure. They are having so much fun as an 18, 19, 20-year-old as the first year.
Right.
They've dreamed of being at that level.
For sure.
So now they're doing it every day.
Yeah.
So we as a fan are thinking, how young they are and how much pressure. And they're like, this is so much fun. Like you're walking into your dressing room. Like in our day, I'm walking in the dressing room. It's Maple Leaf Gardens. The history, you're walking through the hallways look like this room.
Right.
I learned the history of the Toronto Maple Leafs, not by reading books.
Right.
By walking around the hallways after practice.
That's great.
That's how I figured out,
those frames in the hallways, those blue frames.
Yeah.
Everything was the history of the game is within those hallways.
Yeah.
And so the young stuff, then you get, my first car accident.
Okay.
I'm in Scarborough and Russ Courtnall's there. We're on the way to the Jays game. And we're going to be late. Go around this bus. So the city bus is right there. So I go up on the sidewalk around, the city bus turns.
Oh, no.
That's it. And so everybody there knew who Russ and I were, right? The rookies going to the Jays game. And normally it's a typical car accident. Everybody's just gone. No, everybody's going to stay and be a witness.
Because we
got 500 people. Can you guys not go on with your day? No, I'm going to witness what you just did.
They want their story. I always thought Captain Crunch was because you hit people on the ice, but you got crunched by a bus at one point.
No, and I think I had a car deal in the 90s playoffs, and I was coming home in between the games, or in between practice, morning skate and practice. Yeah. So I was right behind, right off Bloor Street, behind the university, cutting through so you stay away from the busy intersection, getting a fender bender right there. And nothing major. Tow trucks come, TV cameras are there, because as soon as it's on the radio,
that it's you.
Every TV, every cop, everybody knows. And so then the car dealer goes, "What? Are you kidding me?" I go, "Just look at the publicity you got. Me sitting on the front end of a car in a car accident, I'm okay."
Yeah, because of your car.
I'm okay because of your car.
Great safety.
But all of a sudden it's like boom, so everybody was there.
So that's, I mean, obviously playing in Toronto, it's going to be an element of it, whether the pressure gets to you or not. But were there ever those situations, you get in a car crash, witnesses want to speak one way or another to what happened, and it may get you into some hot water. Were there ever any situations that you wouldn't have been able to get yourself out of unscathed had you not been who you were in Toronto? Anytime it benefited you.
Well, there's a lot. The first time I got traded to Quebec.
Yeah.
First time. Traded to Quebec on the other side of Kingston, going to training camp, I got my first speeding ticket.
Did you get it, or did you?
No, I wasn't a Leaf no longer. I got my speeding ticket.
So you got off a few before that.
Yeah. All of a sudden, I do get tickets in Ontario.
Oh, that's amazing. So now you just have to be careful when you're driving through that part of the border. That's fantastic. What about nowadays? You still treated with the same respect in
all
running
depends,
through Toronto?
Yeah, young guy, not a young guy. It's you never know. Or some guy, you might get a young guy and he gives you a ticket, and then because we're living up in Aurora, and then he'll come back and tell his buddies, and all the other cop buddies are going, "Really?
You gave it to him?"
Now they're hard on him.
Yeah. But it's a funny thing because we talk about marketability when you say, you still get the same respect in our business.
Oh man.
And I'm happy to be in Toronto as a home base because this is probably the number one market in terms of memorabilia and what it is. But the current players, yes, we work with Marner and Tavares and Riley and all the guys, Matthews, but our bestseller alumni, there's a core of 4 or 5 guys that are day in, day out, continue to sell after all these years. Like Wendel, actually, the reason I kind of looped him into this thing was because we needed more autographs.
Yeah.
So we did a quick signing before the podcast, and we're always running out. There's always new things, and I'm trying to create new ideas and new things that we can market that haven't been out there before. But of course, he's been around for so long, so it's really hard to do. But day in, day out, Daryl Sittler's 10-point night. I don't know who keeps buying those things. I don't know who keeps buying, but you create new fans, like the history of the Leafs. And here's a good question: it said, if again the Leafs win again, will that popularity of the 67 guys, that the last winning team, would they still be there? Mind you, I think a lot of the kids are.
I bet you it goes I think you win over more fans. Like, look at what happened to the Raptors. I mean, now you win it, and now there's so much more appreciation for the history of the Raptors.
Winning is the ultimate. We always we as alumni, and I preached to our alumni. I said, we want our guys to do the best they can do. I am never jealous of how good these guys are.
Yeah.
I says, because the better they do, they've upped the bar because of how high the bar can go with these new young guys.
Right.
Well, then there's just a trickle-down effect for everybody.
Yeah. Sure.
I said, but if you're not winning and there isn't good players, that trickle-down effect, all of a sudden, now you're off the radar.
That's fair.
You
That's
made
fair.
that point earlier.
And so we want our guys, because now you're in the, and we tell the guys when I bump into them or walk in the dressing room and talk to the guys, says, my job is being out in the people. You guys really aren't. You're protected in today's game.
Right.
I'm Daryl, Dougie, we're Darcy and Curtis, who were in part
Ambassadors,
of that. Ambassadors. I said, we like nothing more to prop you guys up because you're playing so well.
Of course.
Because that's fun. Winning is fun.
Yeah.
You mentioned the ambassador thing, and I want to bring this up because it just came up with a couple of other teams. The Leafs are, for many years, under Harold Ballard, didn't really do that much for the alumni. I think the new regime that came in said, look, we got to get these guys back into the building. We got to use them as ambassadors. And it's been very successful. I mean,
Cliff Fletcher started with Daryl.
Right.
Coming back in that 91, I want to say. I think Daryl came back.
So now I'm working with a lot of teams in the NHL. One of them upcoming is the Islanders, and I've been talking to a number of the big stars from their dynasty teams, Mike Bossy, Denny Potvin, Clark Gillies, Trotz, all those guys. And they say, yeah, the team will get you back up here for a special event. They'll fly you up and give you a little per diem, and that's it. But I really feel that you guys as ambassadors to the team, you're around the building, you're handing out jerseys, you're shaking hands with the fan. It keeps the history and the tradition alive. And the Leafs get it. Montreal always got it. Like, they treated their alumni like gold.
Very good.
But some of the new teams don't get it. And I'm trying to the Islanders, and it's about spending a little money on the guys and treating them a little better.
Sure.
But I think it's a big deal.
Well, the big thing they make, because you know how expensive tickets are if you're in Toronto or anywhere. But remember, and I tell the story about it. I said Daryl comes in and he's head to head with everybody 50 and older.
Right.
Grandfathers who are going to tell the grandkids all about watching Daryl, and then all of a sudden I'm hitting the father stage, and Dougie, we're like the father stage just behind Daryl. Then you got Darcy and Curtis that come in, and they're just the Leafs have done a great job. You're hitting the different age groups that are actually spending the money to bring the kids, and you're hitting them all. Oh, that's
great.
Because there's an era for everybody in that building, because it's the grandfather that has the money to buy the 4 tickets that takes the crew. So there's a Darryl fan, there's the Wendel fan, there's a Dougie fan, there's a Cujo fan.
And those
you've just hit off, and
it's just smart marketing.
Well, those new fans now have an association and a relationship to the history of the team. Now they get to plug into that. Whereas if you're not paying attention to the alumni from your franchise, it's very possible that new fans will just fall off a little bit.
And most of the fans in the building, because it costs money to get into the building to watch the game, they were fans of Daryl first.
Right.
Or it would have been Johnny and the Chief that were just ahead of Daryl.
Right.
As they weren't ambassadors as much as they always have been, but they were scouts, but they were still 24/7 in the building, Johnny and the Chief. And so that kind of, and you hit every era.
Yeah.
Johnny, just before he passed away, and I want to say 20 years ago, we had a little bit of a heart issue, and then he come back, and he was for 15 years, he was the youngest guy in the building. Every time he has seen him in the building, he was cheered for like he was everybody's grandfather.
Right.
He wasn't just his own kid's grandfather. He was everybody in the building's grandfather.
Right.
When Johnny Bowers waved up, it was like, that's our grandfather. And,
yeah.
You don't even know.
That's amazing.
And that's what Johnny was to everybody in the building.
Yeah.
He was probably one of the most loved alumni players of all time. I mean, he just gave himself. And I had the honor of walking through I had an invite with Gordie Howe, walking for the banner raising ceremony game after Detroit won. I forget what year that was, but we sat in the stands and we walked in through the players' entrance, and I have never seen anything like this. We walk in through the bowels of the building, and then we get out into the fans, and he was like Babe Ruth walking into Yankee Stadium. And this man sat in the seats, in regular seats behind. I don't know who his manager at the time was, a bit off, but puts him in 4 seats, the 4 of us in seats behind the net. I had to go to the bathroom at the end of the first period. Gordie never left a seat. Fans were really good. They never asked for an autograph. But during the intermission, he couldn't get up to go to the bathroom because there was a lineup from the top of the steps down for autographs.
Wow.
The poor guy sat there. I said, about mid-third period, I said, we got to get him out of here. I mean, this is not right.
Wow.
He was getting up in age, and, and he would have stayed. He never would have left.
Yeah.
That was Gordie.
No, Gordie was that. It was those leaders of the game, the Johnnies, the Gordies, and how they represented themselves on the ice, but off the ice. Mm-hmm. And that's why their auras or likabilities is so high.
Do you see?
It wasn't just on the ice. It was how they were in the public. Then the public would talk about how nice a guy Johnny was, or how good a guy, there's Gordie Howe, the meanest guy in his era type thing.
Right.
He's the nicest guy ever off the ice. Like, all of a sudden his persona just goes through the roof because you could feel and touch it. And another thing, when I first started playing in the Gardens, the fans, the glass was only 2 feet above the board.
Right.
The fans were right there.
Right.
Like, you'd play in Boston Garden, they'd be pouring beer on you if you were at the hash marks. If you're at the hash marks on the sideboards, Boston, they'd reach right over. The second level in Boston was.
If you're going to be pouring it on me, pour it in my mouth. Give me a little of a splash.
Domi when the guy came over the board, over
Philly.
the glass.
In Philly.
Yeah.
So we're running a little low on time. I do have a couple questions. One question is, who was the person that you liked playing against the most? And this could have been through a rivalry or just a friend of yours that happened to be on another team. Who did you most look forward to getting out on the ice against? Did you have a player like that?
No, it was more probably a team, or we always played to win. I didn't care who we played.
Then but
the fun when you played the West Division, you played in what we used to call the Chuck Norris Division or the West Division. It was because of the Edmonton Oilers. It was go.
Yeah.
Like, for a young guy, 18, 19, 20, and you're getting to play the Oilers, we're either winning or losing 7-5.
Yeah.
So as a kid, the coach is going nuts. But we're going to get our chances.
That's amazing.
Because Wayne and Mark, and they're going. Because they're playing the Leafs. They think it's point night.
Right.
So they're going. And so then we're going, because I think the one game in Toronto, we beat Edmonton 11-9 my rookie year. Oh, wow. I said that could have been one of the most fun games. Fans loved it. Players loved it. Coaches hated it. Both coaches would have just hated the game.
Oh, my God.
So the obvious question, you played against Wayne Gretzky many times. What was that like? How did that compare to other players?
Sure.
Was he that head and shoulders?
Well, I always say individually, I would probably say Mario Lemieux is the best player. Like, it's 6'5", the reach, the strength, the size. But when Wayne has a group of players that are talented, that can just about think as well as he does, the things he can do on the ice is, because I always compare it when, you're comparing the Sidney Crosbys and now you're getting into the new younger guys. Sidney's old now. But Wayne Gretzky was still leading by 1,000 points over everybody.
Right.
And he did it without playing in traffic.
Right. Right.
Think of this. He didn't have to play anywhere near traffic and still get 2-3 points a night.
Right.
So he was the foresight of setting and creating, and he's always very nice, and he always says how good these players are. And he's going to say that. But I'm going, he was winning the scoring race by over 50 points every year.
It's insane.
There's been nobody that's done that.
Right. And I hate
compare apples to apples every single year. It's like when Tiger was winning 15 years in a row, number one. Since then, nobody's been more than 6 months.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone, I always hate the argument where it's like, well, it was a different game. Look at the pads. Look at this. Look at that. And it's like, if that's the case, where were the other players scoring as many points as he was?
That's what I'm saying. The consistency, and the closest guy to Mario, is Mario, in my time, to Wayne.
Right.
I think just because Mario did it when you won the cup the one year coming back from beating cancer.
Right.
I said, who does that even? And but he's the closest guy that I've seen that can controls. But you put Wayne, and I really think that 87 Canada Cup, the 2 Canada Cups I was at, the first one, I think Mario learned so much off Wayne, because basically I think 9 players were from the Edmonton Oilers that made the 87 Canada Cup, and just watching how Wayne carried and team guy and making sure everybody's together in his way.
Yeah.
I think Mario took a step in that 87.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that would have been going into his 3rd, 4th year. He really seen the best leader in the game dealing with the best players, because then all of a sudden Mario started winning.
Right.
Oh.
So I think you really seen he learned. And then by 91 Canada Cup, I think Wayne just got me invited so I could tell him how to go out in Toronto without getting okay, Wendel, where do we go where there's no people and have fun? Because you think of how popular we were.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
As Leafs.
Right.
Can you picture a Wayne Gretzky in Toronto?
Would he have gotten
the game?
Would he have gotten more attention than you in Toronto at that time?
Oh, he was. I always say it's like in the NHL today. There's the big guys on the Leafs,
right?
And the only guys in the league that I know of that are bigger than the Leafs are the league guys. So it's the Crosbys,
right?
It's the Ovechkins,
McDavid's,
But the second line guy on any team, nobody knows,
right.
But the second line guy on the Leafs,
everyone knows. Yeah.
In Canada, right? Kind of thing. So and so that's where if Wayne was in his subprime ever, I don't know if he could build walls big enough.
any city in the
much probably why he lives south.
Right. Fair.
Because he can come and get it or not have to be 24/7.
Well, a lot of the guys, and they live in LA, and they can walk around. They're people are used to seeing movie stars and everything else. So even Sidney, when he takes some time off and he'll go to LA,
LA's the way to go
there because he's got a little bit more anonymity when he walks around.
But you're playing in Canada, and especially Toronto and Montreal. I'm trying to think of the people's names. The one actor, and then it was forget the player in Montreal, but he was just a 4th liner.
Right.
And the chef come out of the kitchen in Montreal, and and the actor's over there after it all ends. And he was like a big name actor. Goes, who are you? I'm the backup goalie for the Montreal Canadiens. But that's Toronto and Montreal.
Yeah.
The player is bigger than the biggest movie star.
Right.
You go to New York and LA, it's not like that.
I
so
would
those
imagine,
players that play in those big cities, they have a reprieve.
Right.
Because they aren't the person.
They probably enjoy coming here for the attention, and the people who live here probably enjoy going there for a little bit of a break.
No. It's and not a good or bad. I always find it easier to come here to Toronto as a player to start here. because you go, okay, this is normal.
Yeah.
I got here at 18 and this is how it is.
Right.
So you're even a Clarkson that got traded here, and you come in here at 27, and then you walk into, oh my gosh, I come out of New Jersey and I come into this. There's people sitting on my car after practice. There's people, you don't understand
how much more significant it gets.
So that's an interesting thing. When you left Toronto to go to other cities, was that a big kind of letdown, or by then you had experienced all the great things from
but not really letdown, but you're really how good it is, and this is what I've said for 2 years, that our fans have missed the game not being able to be in the building. But imagine playing as a Leaf or a Montreal Canadian in a 7-game series with those two buildings full. That as a player is so much fun.
Yeah, that's life-changing.
Us as a Leaf going into Montreal and beating them and hearing that building, which is normally through the roof loud, quiet because they're losing.
Right.
Like that is such a good fun thing when you're on the road and you make a building quiet, or you're at home and your fans are nuts.
Yeah.
I feel bad for the players as well as the fans, that energy, because you're watching the games and you're seeing the difference now in the American cities where there's fans.
Oh yeah.
The energy in the and the players feed off that.
Of course. How could you not?
And there's lots of players that maybe crumble under it because there's pressure, and the other players are going, this is fun tonight. Yeah. This is Saturday night. Like,
you would almost think that people who are used to playing in Toronto would be better handling that. And it time and time again in Toronto, at least for the past few years, we've struggled a little bit in the playoffs, but eventually you got to assume that that dealing with the pressure, this young group of kids playing with this much pressure, they're going to be able to turn the corner in the playoffs.
Well, you hope so. You want to be that. You want that moment.
Yes.
You grew up as a kid, and how many times you're sitting on a driveway? It's me and a breakaway scoring the game winner for Stanley Cup. I said, you all did that as kids.
100%.
Now these guys are getting to do it. I said, there's nothing more fun than that.
Of course.
Like realistically, the building going nuts, and I know when I was honored and they raised the banner there, so my family came out to center ice, and my kids were young, and they never heard loud before because they've always been in the stands when they've watched the Leaf game. Well, watching the Matt Sundin era and the playoffs going to the semifinals, and so my kids get to hear a loud building.
Yeah, and
then they came to center ice and heard the cheering because all that noise is now coming. I said, that's
directed
what a player
at you.
hears.
Yeah.
I said, now you hear it from a player's standpoint, not from a fan's standpoint.
I've always wondered if there's like a bubble that you don't hear as much down there.
It goes right through when it's that loud.
Yeah.
It's like a concert. When all the music's coming in.
Oh, that's amazing.
You get the sound of 20,000 fans all going in. My kids are actually scared. They'd never heard that. They've been in it in the stands, but never.
Yeah. Your kids knew what it was like to be you hearing the cheering and the opposing team scared in the ice when they're with you, because you're probably going to take a run at them. That's good. Look, that was a fantastic interview. We're running a little bit low on time. Anything before we go? What is there anything you want to plug? Anything you want to put out there for people to come check you out? Any new?
No, we're all hoping everybody stays safe and we get everything back going again, and we can all start doing our function related stuff.
Can't wait.
Hey, when they open it up, get out to a Wendel Clark's and have yourself a burger or wings.
Absolutely. That sounds great to me. I can't wait.
You're at the restaurants going. Yeah, we got Oshawa, Mississauga, Burlington, and Saskatoon.
Perfect. Good stuff. How often are people going to find you out over at one of those?
I sneak in and I in all of them, but
that's amazing.
I usually go quiet times. They don't know I'm coming in. So.
Just like Wayne Gretzky in Toronto. Yeah.
He'll go in and he just kind of walks around and people go, "Oh my God, there he is!"
Yeah.
And then sign a few autographs and leave, and then that's the greatest experience anybody can have when they go, other than your great food.
Part of the allure for sure. So thanks again so much for joining us. For Wendel Clark, for Brian Aaronworth, president of Frameworth, and myself, Mikey Aaronworth. This is us signing off. Perfect. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we made it to the end of yet another episode. Thanks again so much for joining us. You can find videos of all of our episodes on YouTube by searching the Sign Off Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter at Frameworth Sport or Instagram at Frameworth Sports. And hey, if you're not sick of me yet, you can find me on Twitter over at Retrograde Mikey, or you can always find me embarrassing myself over on Instagram at Aaronworth. The Sign Off is a proud product of Fadoo Productions and Sad Styles Productions. Executive producers Mikey Aaronworth and Andrew Bascom. Until next week, this is Mikey Aaronworth signing off.
Furnished by Sad Styles Productions.
Get into it.